The first time I stepped onto that dusty driveway, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. The kind that sinks into your bones, settles your thoughts, and makes you feel like you're finally home. The smell of pine trees, the distant chirping of crickets, and the golden sunset stretching across the wide sky made everything feel perfect. I had just finished unloading the last of my boxes into the newly restored ranch cabin, a place I'd poured my heart, savings, and sweat into. It wasn't a fancy house. Just a small, hand-built cabin nestled on 8 acres of inherited land from my grandfather. But to me, it was freedom. I was barely inside the door when I heard tires crunching gravel behind me. I turned around, expecting maybe a curious neighbor coming to say hi. But instead, I saw a woman in a stark white blazer, perfectly ironed slacks, and heels that didn't belong anywhere near dirt. She had a clipboard in one hand and a tight scowl on her face. "You the new guy?" she asked without even a smile. "I guess that's me," I replied with a nod. "I'm Carla," she said, standing stiff. "President of the HOA." I blinked, confused. "Sorry, HOA?" "Yes. Homeowners Association. This entire area falls under our community management." She didn't say it like she was introducing herself. She said it like a warning. I frowned. My deed, sitting right inside my cabin, clearly stated this land was not under any HOA. That was part of why I'd chosen this exact plot. No rules, no red tape, no nosy committees measuring my grass or policing my mailbox design. Carla must have seen the confusion on my face. She shoved a folded letter into my hand. "This cabin is in violation of HOA Zoning Code 12A. It is not situated according to the approved neighborhood layout. You'll need to relocate it 300 feet southeast, off the sightline of Oakview Trail." I stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "Relocate the cabin?" I repeated. "I just finished building it." "That's not our concern," she said crisply. "We've had complaints already. The board voted. You'll have 10 days to comply or face enforcement penalties." "Lady," I said, taking a step forward, "this isn't HOA land." She smiled tightly. "It is now." And then she turned and walked back to her car like she'd just issued the final word. I stood there for a few seconds, stunned. No introduction. No welcome. Just a demand to move the home I'd spent 6 months building. But it didn't end there. That night, as I sat on my porch sipping coffee and trying to brush off the incident, headlights flashed down my road again. This time, it wasn't just Carla. 2 men stepped out behind her, one holding a folder, the other carrying what looked like an orange stake marker. And behind them, a county sheriff's cruiser. "What now?" I muttered, stepping off the porch as they approached. Carla marched right up to me and nodded toward the officer. "This man is trespassing," she declared. "His structure is illegal. I'm invoking Article 7 of our HOA charter." The officer, young guy, probably in his early 30s, looked a little uncomfortable. He turned to me. "Sir, can I see some ID and paperwork for the property?" I nodded calmly and handed over my ID, the building permit, and the deed with the survey lines clearly showing my boundaries. He looked through them, frowning, then looked back at Carla. "Ma'am, these are in order. It's county approved. His deed shows this lot as not being part of Oakview Estates." Carla's face twitched. "That was before annexation." "There was no annexation on file," the deputy replied. "If there had been, this permit wouldn't have gone through." Carla stepped back, flustered. "So what now? He just gets to ignore us." The deputy gave me back my paperwork, then turned to her. "This is civil, ma'am. Not criminal. If you believe there's been an error, you'll need to handle it in court." And with that, he turned and walked back to his cruiser. The moment he drove off, Carla looked at me with eyes full of venom. "You'll regret this," she said under her breath. I said nothing. Just watched as she and her crew drove off into the night. But I knew one thing right then: this wasn't going to stop. People like Carla didn't just walk away. They pushed. They bullied. And I just stood in their way. Over the next 48 hours, signs started appearing around my property. Handwritten notes. HOA letters. One even had bold red text that said, "Structure must be relocated immediately or removed." They'd stapled it to my fence. Then came the mailbox note, anonymous, typed, and signed. "You're not welcome here. You'll never be part of this community. Move before we make you." That one? I kept. For evidence. I called the county clerk the next morning, determined to get clarity. When I explained everything, he asked for my parcel number, looked it up, and then chuckled softly. "Yeah," he said. "This isn't HOA property. Never was. They tried to file for annexation about 2 years ago, but it didn't pass. You're clean. Then how are they acting like they own my land?" I asked. He sighed. "Carla James has been trying to expand Oakview's HOA for a while. Problem is, no one actually wants to join. So they just pretend they're in charge. Scare tactics. They've done it before." That was all I needed to hear. I went home, printed out everything, my deed, the clerk's email, the parcel map, and pinned it to the wall. I wasn't moving anything. I wasn't backing down. And the next time Carla came around, I'd be ready. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of hammering. Not from inside my cabin, but somewhere nearby. Curious and slightly annoyed, I stepped outside, only to find a group of people placing wooden stakes and string all along the edge of my driveway. One of them was holding a clipboard, another had a neon vest on, and at the center of it all, of course, was Carla. She didn't even wait for me to speak. "Survey team," she said, without turning her head. "We're marking the new HOA boundaries. You've been sent notice. This land is part of the Oakview Estates Community Expansion Project. You're in violation of code if you refuse relocation." "Survey team?" I asked, walking down the gravel path toward them. "Where's your county authorization?" Carla finally turned, holding a paper in my direction. "This is HOA approval. We don't need county authorization to survey community extensions." I didn't even take the paper. "Except," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket, "your community doesn't legally include this land." The team of men around her stopped moving. I showed them the parcel map on my screen, the one I had gotten from the county clerk. Clearly marked, clearly zoned, and completely outside any HOA jurisdiction. One of the men scratched his head, looking nervously between me and Carla. "That's enough," she snapped at her crew. "Back to the truck." They hesitated for a moment before following her order. Carla stared me down one last time, then stormed off, calling someone on her phone as she walked. I didn't hear the conversation, but I had a gut feeling that she wasn't done yet. The look on her face wasn't frustration, it was planning. Like she was already thinking of the next move. And I was right. That evening, I received an envelope slid under my front door. Inside was an official-looking document with "Notice of HOA Non-Compliance" stamped across the top. It claimed I owed $3,200 in fines for unauthorized construction, obstruction of HOA development planning, and refusal to follow community relocation requirements. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I took the document, photographed it, and added it to the folder I had already labeled Carla HOA Nonsense. I was going to need everything documented, because this was going to court. I'd never sued anyone before. But I wasn't about to be bullied off my own land. Still, Carla wasn't done harassing me. Over the next 2 days, she escalated. First came the threatening texts. Then came the anonymous calls, someone using a blocked number to warn me that bad things happen to people who fight the HOA. And then, on the 3rd day, the sheriff showed up again. But this time, it wasn't the young deputy from before. This one was older, looked like he'd been in the force a long time. He introduced himself as Lieutenant Garrison. "I was sent here for a disturbance report," he said, calm but alert. "Let me guess," I replied. "Carla again?" He nodded slowly. "Mind if I look around?" "Not at all," I said, stepping aside. "Want a coffee too? This is starting to become routine." He chuckled. "Wouldn't be the first time." We walked the perimeter. I showed him the signs, the notes, the fake violations. He examined everything carefully. Then he stepped aside and made a call on his radio. His tone shifted from polite to professional, clipped and firm. After a few minutes, he turned back to me. "I just contacted county records," he said. "You're in the clear. Your land's private, no HOA jurisdiction. I'll file a harassment report, and you may want to press charges if this continues." "Thinking about it," I replied. "And maybe a civil suit too." He gave a nod of support and left. But just when I thought things had peaked, Carla made her boldest move yet. The following morning, as I was clearing brush from the edge of my lot, a group of HOA board members showed up. They marched onto my property carrying boxes, flags, and tools. One of them was even holding a ladder. "What's this?" I asked, walking up to them. "We're installing security signage and HOA fencing," Carla said smugly. "This is now part of the Oakview Estate's protected zone. You can either vacate peacefully or deal with escalating consequences." "That's it," I said. "You're trespassing." She smirked. "Then call the cops." "I won't need to," I replied, pulling out my phone. "Because you already did." I called Lieutenant Garrison directly, using the number he gave me. He was there in less than 20 minutes, and this time, he didn't come alone. 2 county officials followed behind him, both holding clipboards and one wearing a recorder. Carla looked nervous the moment she saw them. She tried to talk her way out of it, throwing words like community preservation and emergency ordinance, but the officials cut her off. "You have no authority here," one of them said. "Your HOA boundary map does not include this parcel. It's independently deeded, and you've now violated multiple county ordinances, including unlawful surveying, harassment, and unauthorized attempts to claim private land." Carla tried to protest, but her words stumbled over themselves. The officials handed her a sealed envelope. "What's this?" she snapped. "An official county cease and desist order," one of them replied. "Effective immediately. Any further action on your part will result in civil penalties and potential criminal charges." I watched as her face dropped. "And one more thing," the second official added. "Your HOA office will be reviewed by the zoning board next week. It looks like we're getting more complaints than just his." She didn't say another word. She just turned, face flushed, and stormed off with her entourage trailing behind her. As they drove away, I stood by the edge of my land, arms crossed, heart racing. Not from fear this time, but from victory. A small one, maybe. But it meant the tide was turning. And something told me I hadn't seen the last of her yet. 2 days passed with an unusual silence. No calls. No knocks. No HOA spies sneaking around with their clipboards and sunglasses. It felt almost peaceful. But I wasn't fooled. That kind of quiet, after the storm Carla stirred up, usually meant only one thing: she was planning something big. And she was. On the morning of the 3rd day, just as I sat on my porch sipping black coffee, a rumble broke through the trees. It was the sound of tires crunching gravel. Not just one vehicle, multiple. I stood up and stepped down the stairs just in time to see 3 black SUVs pulling up to the edge of my land. The doors opened, and out stepped the HOA legal team. Yes. A whole legal team. Suits. Ties. Laptops. Clipboards. Cameras. One man even had a drone. Behind them, Carla stepped out like a queen surveying her kingdom. She wore a wide-brimmed sun hat and dark glasses, like she was ready for a press conference. "This is a formal inspection," one of the lawyers said, approaching me with fake calm. "We're here to notify you of Emergency HOA Ordinance 47B, which grants the Homeowners Association the right to relocate obstructive dwellings built within disputed expansion corridors." I raised an eyebrow. "You made that up." He didn't flinch. "You'll be receiving final relocation paperwork by 5 p.m. today. You have 72 hours to comply, or we will file an injunction." I didn't even blink. I slowly pulled out a flash drive from my jacket pocket and handed it to him. "What's this?" he asked. "Evidence. A full digital record of every HOA violation committed against me since the day I moved in. Harassment, trespassing, false reporting, even attempted land theft. It's already been submitted to the county clerk, sheriff's department, and my attorney." For the first time, he hesitated. "You have an attorney?" I nodded. "Actually, I have a whole team. Turns out Carla's been at this for a while." "My neighbors? The ones who mysteriously sold their land and left?" "Yeah, they're all witnesses. And I've gathered every testimony." Carla stepped forward, suddenly less smug. "You can't fight the HOA." I smiled. "No, but I can sue it." And that's exactly what I did. The next day, I filed an official lawsuit against Carla James and the Oakview Estates Homeowners Association. Counties had been waiting to go after her. Turns out, I wasn't her first victim. She'd been coercing landowners, bullying retirees, and faking regulations to seize property and increase HOA dues for years. But this time, she had picked the wrong guy. You see, I wasn't just some quiet ranch owner. I had legal contacts, I had time, and I had something even more dangerous than anger, I had evidence. 2 weeks later, the court summoned both parties. It was a small courthouse in the county seat, but the tension in that courtroom was big enough to fill a stadium. Carla arrived flanked by 3 attorneys, fake smiling for a local news camera that had caught wind of the scandal. I walked in alone but confident, carrying a single briefcase. The judge was an older man, sharp eyes, calm tone. He reviewed both our filings, and then looked up at Carla. "Mrs. James," he said, "you are attempting to evict a private citizen from land your association has no jurisdiction over?" "Our maps," one of her lawyers began. "Have already been reviewed," the judge interrupted. "They're unofficial. And altered." A hush fell over the room. Carla paled. "Furthermore," the judge continued, flipping pages, "we've received multiple written complaints from former residents of Oakview Estates, some of whom report coercion, harassment, and falsified violation notices under your administration." He set the papers down slowly. "I find this behavior not only unethical, but criminally negligent." One of her lawyers tried to object, but the judge raised a hand. "Mrs. James, you are hereby ordered to cease all HOA activities related to land expansion until a full audit is complete. You are also required to vacate any claims over Mr. Walker's property. Failure to comply will result in criminal charges." She gasped. And then came the line I'll never forget. "Also, the court is issuing eviction notices for any unauthorized HOA installations, fencing, or structures found on Mr. Walker's land, including, but not limited to, those placed during your so-called relocation enforcement." The courtroom went completely silent. Eviction notices. Not for me, for them. Her face turned a shade of red I didn't know existed. After the hearing, as I walked out of the courthouse, the same local news crew caught up with me. The reporter asked, "Sir, how does it feel to win against the HOA?" I smiled. They came for my cabin like I didn't matter. Today, the court reminded them, I do. Back home, as I pulled into the driveway, I saw something both hilarious and satisfying. The survey stakes? Gone. The fake fencing? Hauled away. And on the HOA's half-installed gate sat a single bright orange paper, fluttering in the breeze. The wind was still when I stepped out of my truck, and the sun hung low behind the trees like it was waiting to see what I'd do next. Everything looked different now. My land, my home, felt whole again. The fake fences the HOA tried to install were gone, their warning signs pulled up like weeds. And that bright orange eviction notice posted on their equipment? Still there, fluttering like a flag of victory. I stood there for a long moment, just breathing. No HOA vans in the distance. No surveyors stomping around. No Karen with a megaphone demanding I move my cabin off land that had been in my family for generations. For the first time since I arrived, I felt like I truly belonged here. Over the next few days, word of the courtroom victory spread like wildfire. Local newspapers ran the story. Headlines like, HOA President Loses Land Battle to Ranch Owner, and, Homeowner Beats HOA at Their Own Game, were shared online, and I started getting messages from people all across the state. Some were just congratulating me. Others were asking how they could fight back against HOA corruption in their own neighborhoods. It was overwhelming, but it felt good. One message stood out. It was from an older gentleman named Reggie. Turns out, he was one of the original settlers near Oakview Estates. His family had been bullied by Carla's HOA years ago, and they'd lost their land when she slapped them with fake code violations. They couldn't afford a lawyer back then. They had no one to help. Reggie's message was short but powerful. Son, you didn't just win for yourself. You won for all of us who couldn't. That hit me hard. But my fight wasn't over. Remember Carla? Well, she didn't just disappear quietly. In fact, a few days after the ruling, she made one last bold attempt. A letter came to my mailbox. Handwritten. No return address. Just a short message. You may have won this round, but the HOA still controls this community. You can't hide behind one judge forever. I smiled, folded the letter, and walked straight into the sheriff's office. The deputy on duty laughed when I handed it over. That woman just doesn't quit, huh? Turns out, the court wasn't done with her either. The audit that had been ordered? It uncovered thousands of dollars in misused HOA funds, money she had redirected to renovate her personal home, build fences around other people's property, and even fund those legal inspections she brought to my land. Within weeks, Carla James was officially removed as HOA president. She was also charged with multiple counts of fraud, misuse of authority, and trespassing. Her mansion, built right at the edge of HOA-controlled land, was now under investigation too. Several of its permits were voided when auditors discovered they had been rubber-stamped by her own office. And yes, that meant she might have to relocate her own structure. The irony was poetic. As for the HOA? With Carla gone and several other board members resigning to avoid charges, a new leadership committee was formed. One of the first things they did was reach out to me. I met them one early morning at the edge of the woods, right where the HOA signs used to sit. There were three of them, an older woman named Grace, a young couple named Daniel and Tanya. Mr. Walker, Grace said gently, we wanted to apologize. On behalf of the new HOA board, we are deeply sorry for what you went through. She handed me a paper. It was a formal letter of apology signed by the new board. More importantly, attached to it was an official statement. The HOA would permanently recognize my property as exempt from all Oakview expansion plans. I was now, legally and finally, untouchable. Daniel chuckled nervously. We honestly can't believe the old board tried to move your cabin. Like, how do you relocate a man's home because it blocks their view? I smiled. That's what I said. We shook hands, and just like that, peace settled in. But I wasn't about to let all this fade into a quiet memory. I knew there were people out there still dealing with nightmare HOAs, still being bullied, still afraid to speak up, still being told their homes were in the way. So, I started something small. A website. Just a basic one. NoIrelandRights.org. I uploaded every document I had, every legal tip I learned, every form someone might need to push back against corrupt HOA leadership. I added a section where people could share their own stories. Within a month, hundreds of emails poured in. People from Florida, Texas, California, even other countries, telling me how they'd been scammed, harassed, and threatened. And suddenly I realized, this wasn't just a personal fight anymore. It was a movement. I didn't just win my land back. I lit a fire. Back at the ranch, things finally fell into rhythm. The birds returned to the trees. My dog started sleeping on the porch again instead of nervously pacing. The wind sounded peaceful now, not like it was carrying bad news, but like it was finally at rest. I added a new sign to the front gate. Simple. Wooden. Hand-carved letters that read, Legacy Ranch, established, defended, and never leaving. It reminded me that homes aren't just buildings. They're stories. History. Pride. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they become symbols. Symbols that show when you stand your ground, no matter how loud the enemy shouts, justice finds its way home. And for the HOA that once tried to erase mine,